Now, on one side of this, we are saying that we should allow assisted dying is Rabbi Jonathan Romain, and in the other side is Caroline Farrow, campaign director of CitizenGO. Now, of course, as both of you know by now, you each get 60 seconds to state your case, and then we have it out in a wider debate. So, Caroline, I'm going to start with you, please. Your 60 seconds starts now. Should assisted dying be legal?
Let's call assisted dying what it really is, and that is assisted suicide or euthanasia. I think the problem is that as soon as you have a right to die, it soon morphs into a duty to die. And when we look at yesterday's vote, it was very split. It was only won by 4 votes. Now, the Royal College of GPs has last year, in February 2020, their 50,000 members, they were polled and they said, no, we do not want to introduce assisted suicide. I think we have to remember that it is really wrong to take the life of innocent people, and we need to be putting more money into palliative care. The problem is, once you start legalising something like this, then people are confused what is legal with what is moral, and it absolutely isn't moral to take the life of innocent people and people who are vulnerable, sick and dying. And also public polling as well. Over 51% of people have said that they're very concerned that if assisted...
All right, that's your 60 seconds, I'm afraid. 60 seconds, we'll come back to all of that. Rabbi Romain, your 60 seconds starts now. Should assisted dying or assisted suicide, depending on which side of the coin you're on, be legal?
Yes, it should be, because, look, we all have to die one day. Hopefully we will gently fade away. But there are some people who die in excruciating pain from cancer or who are crippled with Parkinson's motor neurone. These are people who are dying. They're terminally ill, and they would like to let go of life a few weeks or even months earlier. Why are we forcing them to live on in pain when they are dying already? And by the way, we're not taking life. They will be taking their own life, and the assisted bit is just that they go to the GP, they get a prescription, and they are then allowed to take their own life. This is much more humane. Now, most of us will want to continue to our dying breath, and we'll keep going as long as we can. That's great. And hospices and hospitals are there to help us. But people who want to let go of their own free will and who are terminally ill and are dying already, in whose interest are we keeping them alive against their will? This seems to me the most religious, the most humane, the most moral way.
OK, there you go. That's your 60 seconds as well, I'm afraid. So there you go. Interesting points, interesting points.
Yeah, Rabbi Romain, thanks for that. Let me just come to you first. There's a massive split on this issue. Just looking at what the British Medical Association voted for, 49 in favour of taking no official position, the side that won, so to speak, 48 opposed to it. I mean, we're too split on this issue to make such a massive fundamental change to the law, surely.
No, because they're not split in the sense of for and against. They're just saying, look, we're going to be neutral. So in other words, they're doing the decent thing, which is allowing doctors to have their own opinion. And by the way, this was only the split between the actual delegates. This was based on a survey of their members, tens of thousands of members, the majority of whom said they were either in favour of assisted dying or being neutral. So actually, amongst the membership of itself, amongst the doctors, there was a much greater level in favour of changing to neutrality. Neutral means people can make up their own minds. Surely that's the best thing. We are individuals with our own thoughts, and you and I have our own right. So Caroline and I disagree. That's fair enough. All the doctors are doing is saying, look, we're not taking a position for or against, and it's now up to Parliament.
All right, Caroline, I'm just going to lob it over to you now. Mark's been in touch. When you've watched your 43-year-old father waste away to nothing in absolute agony before finally dying in excruciating pain, you might change your view. Do you think you would?
No, I don't think I would. I think, it's awful when we hear cases like this, but this increases the need for really good palliative care. And we have a hospice movement. I think the problem is when we start legalising assisted suicide, what happens is that then becomes an automatic pathway on the NHS. So you get a terminal diagnosis and straight away you will be offered, as happens, years and years ago, we were told with abortion, and I'm sorry to bring this in, but hard cases make bad law. And we were told that this would be a very rare thing and it would only be the hardest of cases. And now what we have 50 years later is as soon as a woman is pregnant, she's asked, is it planned, is it unplanned? Do you want the option for an abortion? Which, of course, many people will feel happy with. But we'll see the same sorts of pressure put on people who are terminally ill. They'll get that diagnosis, they'll find out that they've got a degenerative disease, and straight away the GP will be saying, do you want to consider assisted suicide? Or, to use the euphemism, assisted dying. And then that instantly starts ratcheting up the pressure on people. And, when we know that we've got an NHS that's very pressurised, we start adding assisted suicide into the mix, and people are going to feel under intolerable pressure.
But doesn't Rabbi Romain make a really key point here, which is that it's about the individual's choice? And what is the justification that somebody who, is clearly very, very ill, what's the justification for forcing them to live, what could be a few days, a few more weeks of agony often? What's the justification that somebody else should make that decision for them?
Sorry, is that to me?
Yeah, sorry, to you, Caroline.
Sorry. Well, I think we have to go back to the fact that for the past, couple of thousand years, the Hippocratic Oath is "Thou shalt do not harm." The role of doctors is to preserve life, and not to go about arbitrarily ending it. Now, I think yes, there is a case for really good palliative care, which we have. It doesn't have to be like this. People should not clearly be dying in pain. And there is a difference, I think, between keeping somebody alive using sort of extraordinary and painful and burdensome means and actually saying, OK, let's give care that's going to ease pain and suffering. And then between saying, OK, here's something which is actually going to end your life. Now, we can never be clear when somebody gets a diagnosis. We can never be 100% clear as to how long the rest of their life is going to be. And very often you speak to relatives of people who have, died of a terminal disease, and they've actually reported a peaceful death, a peaceful, well-managed death where they've been able to reconcile. All
right, Rabbi, you're obviously a religious man, I imagine. Is it not fair to say that in a lot of religions, actually, suicide, which in a sense this is, if you're pushing the button on your own life, is pretty much frowned upon? How does that square with you?
That's certainly true, and there is a division amongst religious leaders, and that's fair enough, just like Caroline and I disagree. I mean, there are legitimate expressions on both sides, but, we keep on coming back to the argument, in whose interest are we keeping a dying person alive against their will? There's that lovely verse in the Bible, there's a time to be born and a time to die. Well, it doesn't say who chooses, and maybe it's a more religious, more moral, more humane to give the person concerned that choice. And I have to tell you, I've often spoken about this up and down the country, and time and again I get people arguing against. But when I ask them the question, look, if it was you, forget about principles, and you were dying in excruciating pain, would you like to have that option? Not obligation, option. Then everybody's hand in the room shoots up. It's a matter of individual choice, and this is what it is about, giving people the choice to control their own life and now also their own death. What could be fairer than that?
Can I just ask you, though, what you make of a point Caroline made, which was that there's a slippery slope to these things. Firstly, you might introduce something with all the best intentions in the world, but it almost sort of opens the door for more extreme, more relaxed versions of those laws further on down the line.
Well, there's two answers to that. Firstly, there would only be a change in the law later down the line if politicians, in other words, the people we elect to Parliament, actually legislate it. It doesn't happen by itself. It's only because society wants that change. So it doesn't happen automatically. And the other thing is, and this may sound rather bizarre, but I think we can see the future. I wouldn't claim that normally about anything else, but in this case we can, because the system that's being proposed for England is exactly what's been happening in Oregon in the United States for the last 25 years. So we know the system works, and there's been only a very, very small increase over a quarter of a century, and the original laws are virtually the same as they are now. So we know this is a tried and tested system, and we can look over at Oregon and say, yep, they've done it. Why don't we join them as well?
OK, Caroline, we're a bit pressed for time, but I'm just going to give you the last word, as it were, so just respond to that.
OK, well, in Oregon last year alone, numbers of assisted suicides went up by 28%. So, you can see the numbers rising. I think, although the rabbi makes a very good point about, it seems a good point about individual choice, but actually we have a duty to wider society. We have a duty to protect everybody, the sick and the vulnerable. And it's not very long before a right to die becomes a duty to die. And we need to oppose this.
OK.
Well, both of you, it's been a great discussion, very civil. It's always great to have two opposing sides and still be civil. When we're debating it, Rabbi Jonathan Romain there and Caroline Farrow, who's campaign director at CitizenGO. Thank you for joining us. This
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.